Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us today for our industry partnership briefing webinar. We really appreciate that your interest in the multiple awards, GSA's multiple awards schedule, and particularly the professional services and human capital multiple awards schedule. And we value you as our industry partners. And today, this is the first webinar of the fiscal year 23 series. And we're very delighted to have a real champion of industry, anything that has to do with industry. Mike Rice, who has so much experience across both government and industry, and has done internal work for GSA for 20 years as an industry partner. But before I go into more detail about Mike and the really informative presentation that I know he's going to do for us today, because he always shares so much information that people always come away with a lot. I just want to quickly go through some housekeeping stuff. One, you might not have received the presentation prior to this, but it's no problem. You can just go over and download it yourself from the chat function. We ask everybody to please make sure that you're on mute. Questions are generally saved to the end of the presentation. However, Mike might choose to answer some questions in real time. That will be up to him. But any questions you have, you can put them in the chat function. I think that's basically all I have relevant to housekeeping issues. So I just want to give you a little bit more information about what you will hear today. One of the things is that this coming year is going to have a full of phase solicitations and oral presentations that will be a big part of that. And so that's why Mike is going to focus on that. Just to tell you a little bit more about him, he's a co-founder and chief operating officer of Cornerstone IT. He spent 40 years providing information technology and program leadership, supporting both industry and government. And he has been privileged to support 3 presidential transition teams. His love and primary focus for the past decade has been on business development, writing, teaching and coaching oral presentations. And as many of you may know, but if you don't, he's the author of a book called In Pursuit, a Business Development Life Cycle. In Pursuit, Coaching Orals, and co-author of The $1 Billion Secret. Okay, so that being said, I am going to turn this over. I'm going to give Mike the mic. And Mike, go for it. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you very much. You make me sound smart. I appreciate it. Anyway, yes, guys, it's a pleasure to be here. This is my 3rd time coming back to speak to this group. I'm excited about what this group is all about. And so I'm hoping that you get something out of this presentation. Like Arlinda said, I do coach orals. It's one of the things that I love to do. I'm a teacher by nature, and coaching is something I've always done. I grew up in sports. When I couldn't play anymore because the body got too old, I coached. And so when it comes to coaching, I get real excited about it. This was actually put together. The material you're going to see, I give this to all my clients. So when we talk about what the process is, we're going to walk through the process. This is the presentation I give them. So you're getting something that's not necessarily new. It's new this year, but we're going to walk through this. I'm going to do my very, very best to move out. Write down your questions, because I chase shiny objects. A question's going to come up, and I'm probably going to lose track of where I'm at. So if you can write your questions down, we're going to do our very, very best. I'm going to try to get through this within the first 30, 40 minutes. So we do have time for Q&A. Okay. Yes. So anyway, like Arlinda had kind of alluded to, This coaching system is based on the processes in our books, and then some proprietary courseware, which you've heard us talk about before, that we do corporately, and we do it at George Mason University. Okay, so let's jump right in. Let's get into this, and let's take a look at what the bar is saying. Okay, and I'm going to paraphrase this. It's written down so you can see it. Okay, but FAR 15.1 and 2 basically says anything other than your pricing. Okay, any part of that solicitation other than your pricing, and frankly, also talks about your reps and certs, can be done through an oral presentation. And we're seeing some real creative phased solicitations, and orals is becoming a big part of the anatomy of those solicitations. Acquisitions we're trying to streamline acquisitions. I work with the federal government. Arlinda and I work together on a couple of committees through ACT-IAC and GovEast. And this is what we're really trying to do. The government's trying to focus on cleaning up acquisition, make it a little bit more streamlined, save money. A lot of times people don't understand that acquisitions cost the government money. And every time they pull an acquisition, start over, that's more money they got to spend. So they're really getting smart about how to put these things together. So based on the FAR, we're seeing more and more. I've been coaching more and more this last year, and it's because this is the way they're going. Some of the things we're seeing in the anatomy, which is really interesting, is that we're moving into these phase solicitations. I don't know if you've ever been part of. So they'll walk in, and your first phase might be an oral presentation on your corporate experience. Okay, I saw one. I didn't coach this one. I saw one where the first phase, which was interesting to me, was an oral presentation on your key personnel, who your key personnel were. And so the key personnel came in and introduced themselves, talked about their experience, and then they do. And this is interesting. We all used to see the down selects, firm down selects. Well, after a firm down select, typically that's when the protests go out. Okay, so what they're doing is they're moving into what's called an advisory down select. And we talked a little bit about this a couple months ago. And advisory down select basically is saying, look, we don't think you're going to be able to go far in this year. It's up to you if you want to continue on. But as the technical evaluation board, as we're seeing this, we don't think you're going to do well. Most companies drop out there. Okay, bids and proposal money is very, very valuable. Okay, so taking all this, what we did was we decided that we were going to develop a system. Okay, and I wish I could tell you that this is the most creative system in the world. No, this is kind of it's called the 4 Ps of presenting. And what we did was we embedded inside the system, some of our practices. And the 4 Ps are very simple: plan, prepare, practice, and present. Those are your 4 Ps. Very, very simple, easy to think about. Okay. Now, as we begin to embed our processes, we start to look at, there's 2 sides to this. One is the teaching the rules of the game. And a lot of times folks walk into an orals presentation, don't quite understand what's the rules of the game. What are they trying to accomplish? And then there's the coaching side. And so you have both teaching side, you have a coaching side, and really, folks, you need both. I was in a meeting with one of my customers the other day. He was joking with me. He says, you give up all this information. He goes, man, people could just take your presentation and run with it. We could buy your book. Okay. Okay. All right. So secret sauce is not necessarily in the presentation itself or in the book itself. The secret sauce really is the coaching. And I used the example with him. I said, okay, I can hand you a book on how to play basketball. Okay. So here's a book. This is the rules of the game. This is how you play basketball. Now go in and start playing professional basketball. Ain't going to happen. Okay. What would a team be like, a football team be like, if it didn't have a coach on the side? Taking a look at the game itself and coming up with the strategies and that type of thing. Even chess players, the champion chess players have got coaches. Okay. So you can't rule out the coach. You need both. You need to understand both the rules of the game, and then you got to learn how to coach the game itself based on the rules. Okay. One of the first rules of the game is when we talk about is what orals is really all about. And I do spend a little bit of time on this. All right. So forgive me as I try to build this conversation. When you submit your orals presentation, your slides, okay, they're usually a part of your technical approach. Okay. Matter of fact, sometimes your slides are your technical approach, right? Well, then why go to orals? Okay. They know your technical approach. They see what your staffing is supposed to look like. They've already seen, well, the one side has already seen the pricing. Okay. There's something about orals which is important. Okay. All right. So source selection board, they can't guarantee who wrote your proposal. You can hire professional writers. Hey, you got proposal writers all day long, okay, that can get in there and write professional proposals, okay? Back in the day when they started doing orals, there were whole acting groups out there that came in, they were professional actors, and they did their orals. Well, the rules had to change a little bit because that is not what oral presentation was supposed to be about. Orals is about this. It's the idea of being able to dialogue and assess the program management and technical leadership of the offer. Okay. So we used to call them soft skills, but they're not necessarily soft skills. They're looking at this. What's the leadership qualities of the program manager? What's the competency of the key personnel? How well does the key leadership work together? Oh, that's so important. When we start talking about moving out of orals, moving into doing the technical challenges, a lot of these rules still apply. You don't have to finish that challenge to get through, okay? But if you finish that challenge, they look at that team knows how to work together. That's what they're looking for. And they want to make sure that the contractor staff and government staff will mix well together. Senior 1102 told me one time, and he was actually looking at my book. I sent the manuscript to him. He worked for GSA. He was out of FedSim, and he looked at my book, and he looked at me and says, Mike, here's something that's really important. He says, I need to bring this out. The most compelling component of your proposal needs to be your bid program manager. I'm like, wow, how real is that? Okay. So orals gives them the ability to say, can I trust my program with this individual? And so those are some of the things we try to work through. Okay. I'm going to say this again. You can win or lose in orals. And so that's why it's so important to understand the rules of the game and being coached through it. Okay. So let's go. Let's keep moving. Let's move right into orals planning. If you've ever worked in a life cycle, okay, and this is a notional life cycle. This is what I base my book on. You've got your identify your opportunities, okay. You qualify your opportunities. You go into a capture process. You do proposal. You have post proposal. You have post award. 6 phases, and they're notional phases. And pretty much every framework out there is going to be represented in these 6 phases. Well, we begin planning. We've already identified this opportunity. Took a look at this opportunity, and we've already began to plan that we're going to go. We made the decision, that gate review, to go into and really qualify this. And one of the first things we do is we SWOT. Okay, you SWOT strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Okay. Now, when I was doing the qualify process, I looked at the incumbent. Now, when I move into the capture process, I'm looking at the entire landscape. I'm beginning to look at the entire landscape. Okay. And it's in the capturing process, and I added a bullet because it's over on the other side to evaluate the solicitation. If you saw me a couple times ago, I used the next slide that's coming up, and I just kind of walk through that again. Look for those key discriminators. What are our win themes? And then we get into how we're going to lay out the slides. Okay. Everybody understands some of this. This might be intuitively obvious. Okay. But I'm going to talk about some things that are not very intuitive. All right. So we deal with chevrons to kind of show where we're at. And we'll take a look at an example slide. Compliance areas to help the evaluators see where we're going to be compliant. Color schemes and graphics. We want it to look good. And then there's this thing called 2x3, and I call it capturing the mind. I worked about 30 years ago with an executive, kind of an executive learning facilitators company. We did a lot of work within the federal government, and we came up with what's called the 2x3 paradigm. Okay, now just be with me. Follow me a little bit on this. Okay, people think one of 2 ways. There's my 2. Okay, they're either conceptual or they're detailed. Now there's a spectrum in there, so there's somewhere in that spectrum, but for the most part, they're either a conceptual thinker or a detailed thinker. I'm a conceptual thinker, okay? So pictures say a lot to me, all right? Well, then that 3 there is, okay, I can figure out how you're thinking. That 3 there is, how do people learn, okay? Well, people are either going to learn visually, okay, audibly, what they hear, and it's called tactile. We like to call it experiential, okay? They have to touch it. They have to do something. A tactile learner writes things in their own handwriting. Okay, so when we're working with our coaching individuals, I can sit down with any one of my classes and can tell you whether you're a conceptual thinker, a detailed thinker. Okay, and right away I can tell what type of learner you are. Okay, let me give it away. Here's the secret. If you're looking right at me, okay, if I'm up in a class and I got my slides up, whenever you're looking straight at me, guess what? You're an audible learner. You're listening to the words that I say. Visual learners are trained on the presentation, okay? Guess what my tactile learners are doing? they're scribbling notes as fast as possible because that's how they capture that information. So the idea is that even in oral's presentation, we want to learn to capture the mind. And that gets into how we lay out our slides. That gets into how we lay out our information. It gets to how we're making our presentation, okay? Because we're going to talk a little bit later about that nonverbal that becomes important. Proof points and takeaways. You do these in your written proposals. We need to be able to do proof points and takeaways. Proof points are, here's my past experience, okay? Takeaways on the slide. What do I want them to remember from that slide? And typically, benefits are key. You show them quantifiable benefits on your takeaways. They will remember that. And that's the last thing they look at when they're on the slide. We talk about how to start graphics and slides. If you have graphics that you're using in your written proposal, you want it to come out in your slides. You want to have that consistency in your story. What is your over offer design? Am I explaining my offer design well? Service area strategy is just a new word for your technical approach, okay? Everything's a service area, so there's a service area strategy. Your operational strategies, okay? That's your management approach. That's your staffing, okay? So those are things that are very, very key. We got to make sure we have those things nailed down, and we want to know exactly how to present them. And then your transition strategy. Too many times, people writing proposals are forgetting about the risk mitigation strategy, and that's your transition strategy. And you will win or lose your recompetes under transition, okay? All right. I see what I did. I chased that shiny object. The question came up and I looked over there. So let me try this. Let's see if I can do this. What are the big red flags, no-nos when it comes to orals, in your opinion? Big red flags. Timing. And the biggest one is how well that team works together. Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. I don't want a program manager that answers all the questions. Okay, I want the whole team to work together. He needs to learn how to hand off questions, and we're talking about Q&A is a big place for that. How they hand off their presentations. Okay, and we're going to talk about that too. I saw the greatest moment in Oral's presentation. I coached the team. I was the executive that was there, and I sat there. I'll give you the example now. I'll jump ahead because it's a shiny object, and I can't help myself. Okay. So this gentleman was very, very nervous, and he was so fun to watch when he was practicing. He'd be up on the board. We had the wall, all the slides are on the wall. He's walking through slides. He'd mess something up, and you could see him mess something up, and he'd go back, he'd start over. And he just made me smile because he really was taking this thing seriously. Now, let me show you the opposite of a no-no, okay? This is the best thing I ever saw, and this will maybe drive home a point. The person got done. He was so nervous. He got done. He did so well. He practiced. He knew he was extemporaneous. We'll come back to that. He knew exactly what he was the expert. He came across as the expert. And as he's coming off, and I'm looking at everybody, he goes, "How was that, boss?" He said that to the bid PM. And the boss said, "Dude, man, that was awesome." Okay. Everybody in that room heard it. Everybody in that room saw it. Everybody in that room smiled. That was a great moment. Okay. So the no-nos is when we can't develop that chemistry within the team. The positive is when that team is so cohesive and they're trusting one another, and we get into that. And that's the stuff that we try to coach into that. Okay. I hope that answered your question. But when there is inconsistency, when there is, what's the word I'm looking for? When there is some fracture in between the presenters and the bid PM, yeah, that's a major no-no. We don't go there. So, all right. I think I covered this slide. If a couple of weeks ago, you guys saw me do this slide, I want to talk about it real quick. All right. So you got your market research documents, which isn't up here. You got your solicitation documents, which is up here, and you got your requirements documents. Okay. Last time when I spoke, I said you gotta mind your P's and Q's. You gotta understand the difference between an RFQ and an RFP. RFQs are very, very tactical. Okay. In an RFQ, you typically have a statement of work, right? That's your requirements document, but it can also have a PWS. Tactical, government knows what they want. Okay, they're basically looking for some sort of a staffing plan, a quote. We gotta take a close look at what type of response, what type of solicitation document, okay, that we're answering to, because it makes a difference. If you look at the requirements documents, you got the statement of work, the PWS, the SUE. Okay, statement of work. Please forgive me if you remember this from the last time. It really is paint by the numbers. This is very tactical, and what they're going to do is they're going to judge you on, did I stay within the lines? Did you pick the right colors? You know, sometimes when you got a statement of work, it's not time to be creative. It's time to do it exactly the way they want it. And they want to see the quote, request for quote. That's what they're looking for. How much is this going to cost? PWS gives you a little bit more latitude. Instead of painting this tree by the numbers, it says painting a green tree. Okay. Now you get to choose what that green tree is supposed to look like. Okay. So they're giving you a little bit of latitude in it. Okay. They want to see a little bit of creativity. All right. But they're giving you, this is kind of some rules. These are some of the things that we're looking for. Statement of objectives, Wild Wild West. Okay. You know what? I'm doing this. I'm not paying attention. I'm looking at the pictures. Okay. So the statement of objectives is basically the customer's not quite sure, and we've all worked on these. They go, here's my business use case. How am I going to solve this? Okay. And it's basically paint any tree, just solve my problem. Okay. Typically, and this is funny, I actually saw one this year, a statement of objectives with a staffing matrix. I was like, whoa, that was interesting. Okay. What's the customer doing? It was a draft, by the way. It was a draft statement of objectives, but it had a staffing matrix in it. Well, statement of objectives means I need you to help me solve this problem. What was the customer doing with a staffing matrix that they anticipated? They're telling the vendors, they're telling the industry out there, I have a budget. This is kind of how much I got to spend. You figure it out, but don't go way out here. I worked on one this year where the winner was $70 million. It was answer to statement of objectives. And the loser was $350 million. So a big difference between the two. Okay. So I think the government is getting smarter about, we need to kind of give a little bit of information on what our budget's going to look like for this. Oh, by the way, a lot of that information is already available in public domain sites. Okay. Not public domain, transparency sites. And we can talk about that some other day. Okay. So evaluate your solicitation so you know how you're going to organize this presentation. Guys, if it's under the uniform contract format, FAR 15 to a 4, we all know these things. Okay, you know how this works. The proposal managers right away going to section L, section M. Your capture managers looking at section M. Your solutions architects looking at section C. I mean, they have these functions that are out there. They're shredding the solicitation and getting a feeling for what's going to be required of them. Especially in orals, do not read past section H. Okay, section H usually talks about the key personnel qualifications. Okay, so just as a note, make sure you take a look at section 8 and take a look at your key personnel. Okay, so we shredded the solicitation. We kind of know where we're going with this thing. Okay, we can begin to plan it. When we set up our slides, okay, I think this is critical too. Just like when you write in your proposals, and your proposal writers that are watching here, you've done this before. So you're in your section, this paragraph, and you're saying, I'm going to use the slide up here so I don't have to think about it. All right, this section is going to talk to C.5.1. It's going to satisfy the organization of L.1.2. And sometimes you put your M in there. This is for evaluation 2.3.4. Okay. So what you're doing in your proposal writing is you're helping the evaluators know where to go to make sure you get that compliance check mark. Okay. So you do the exact same things on your slides. On your slides, you pick an area, and eventually, as you're making your presentation, people are looking for their areas where the compliance are, and it helps them check you off with a check mark. They don't want to spend a lot of time trying to find compliance. You go, well, I was compliant because I said this. Yeah, but we were dead lost the way you organized this. We didn't know if you actually satisfied that particular place. Help your evaluators. That's what the compliance part is. We talk about chevrons. We talk about this a little bit more. Chevrons kind of let you know where you're at in the process of making this proposal. And I picked one of my this is from one of my other classes. Okay, but look at this. This has to do with orals. Okay, so C.5.1 in this example said that you can please identify what phase. Okay, that you are in. Okay. And then L.1.2 said, I want you to organize it by the business development lifecycle. Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm actually answering that question, and I'm telling them where in the process I'm in the proposal process. Okay. I've worked on some that were like 3 levels deep. Okay. So the chevrons don't have to look like this. Okay. They can be tabs. This presentation just looks like chalkboard colors. Okay. They're chevrons. You're seeing we're still talking about planning. Okay, so your mind knows exactly where we're at on this thing. Again, on this particular slide, you notice what I've done is I've got my conceptual picture on the left side of the slide. I should do it the other way because you guys are looking at me. But the detail are the bullets, okay? So I'm satisfying both parts, all right? I don't have, on this particular example, I don't have a proof point, but a proof point would be, just saying you work with your written proposals. A proof point is where we've done it in the past. And at the very bottom, takeaway should always indicate a benefit to the customer with respect to the content of the slide. So when they walk away from the slide, you've got compliance. They've got, it doesn't matter how they think, okay? You've got both sides of taking a look at the information. You present it both ways. And when they walk away, they go, ah, this is a benefit to us because we do it this way. So how you lay your slides out are important. Rabbit trail. I'm gonna come up on a rabbit trail. I've worked with other consultants that they're so compliance-based thinking, okay, that what they will do is they will pack the slide with as much information as possible. And as long as you touch it, it's compliant and you move on. In orals, remember what you're trying to do, okay? You're trying to convince your audience that this is the team that are the experts and we want them managing our program, okay? So what I want to do is I want to be able, if I have to take something that's said in one slide and make it 3 slides so they get the information, that's what I would prefer to do. Some of you out there probably disagree with me, but I've worked enough with all of them to know that this is the best way of doing it. Matter of fact, this is the same format you would use if you were teaching the class. This is what I'm doing. I'm teaching my class, okay? All right, let's keep going. Let's move into the prepare. So I make sure that we have time, okay? We're gonna have plenty of time for Q&A, okay? So prepare. Oral preparation, okay? We're still teaching the rules of the game, okay? Just like anything else, compliance first, then compelling. Compliance first, then compelling, okay? So compliance, we want to make sure we align with our technical volume. And I put something here too, which is interesting. Service area, I said this earlier. Your service area strategies and your operational strategies need to be in alignment. They're getting good at this. I did support this with a friend of mine. They submitted and they did not win. And they said, Mike, what do you think happened? And I said, well, let's find out. So they did the debrief. I said, I want you to ask these questions. And I gave them the questions I wanted them to ask. This is what the government said. You gave us a service area strategy, okay? You gave us a technical approach, which was brilliant. We looked at your staffing plan and there was no way. We know you're messing with us. So your staffing plan is going to be your budget, okay? This was your cost volume. We didn't have to look at the cost volume. That's the contracting officer's part. We knew you wouldn't be able to do it with the staff that you had. They're getting smart about this stuff, folks. So make sure things are in alignment and they got to come across in your orals. Compelling, remember I told you, leadership assessment. That's what this is all about. You win themes and discriminators. What sets you apart from everybody else? Okay, we all know that. Guess what? I'm going to drive this home. Make sure your service area strategies and your operational strategies make sense. They're lined up, okay? They make sense with each other. And then we have this thing called excellence, okay? Excellence is kind of important. I'm telling you a mistake I made. I learned from a lot of my mistakes. On a written proposal one time, here's a perfect example, okay? This graphic we used before was a great graphic. And we said, we're going to take that graphic, we're going to put it in a proposal, gave it to the graphic artist, and he forgot to take the old agency name off of it. Oh, okay. They pick up on that, okay? When we talk about excellence, these are some of the things we're looking for. No typos, no gremlins, no open references. Don't give them anything that's going to leave questions, okay? Make sure your presentation quality is clean. Fight for the right story, all right? Everybody asks me, what do you mean fight for the right story? You've got something to tell, okay? And too many times when you bring somebody in on the outside, they try to change the story a little bit, okay? What ends up happening is if I'm not fighting for the story, my compliance story, my compelling story, if we've defined that story, we got to stick to that story. And I've had people come in and water down the story, okay? And it wasn't as potent as it could be. So learn to fight for the right story. This is what we're trying to tell here, okay? So here we are. We're wrapping up the teaching of the rules of the game. Now we're getting into the fun stuff, and that's the coaching side, okay? So when we approach coaching, typically we know we got 60 to 90 minutes, okay? Always it's the key personnel. Remember we said no more actors. They'll have rules in there that only the key personnel can make this presentation. You can have an executive to kick it off, that type of thing, okay? We did one where the executive was allowed to speak, and the rule was, notice this, your executive is that goes into the time, that those minutes, those 60 to 90 minutes of your presentation, okay? Well, we picked our CTO one time. And we put our CTO in to represent the company, was able to talk to the company. But as our CTO, he was able to talk to the entire ConOps. That was all put together and brought cohesiveness from the top down to the presentation. It was very, very effective, and they did win. So just to let you know. So we start off right away. Coaching the individuals. Okay. All right. So I've been using sports analogies. I'm going to go to a music analogy. Okay. I grew up in sports. I told you that. I also grew up in music. Okay. And so at this point in time, I'm thinking along the lines of a choir director. Right. And what does choir directors do when they get a choir and they're learning a new song? Okay. They go through sectionals. Okay. So what I do is, so their sectionals are, I'm going to work with my basses, I'm going to work with my tenors, I'm going to work with my altos, and then I'm going to work with my sopranos. Okay. So it's kind of the same thinking, if that makes sense. So I get my primary and my alternate speaker, okay, and they become a group, and we do sectionals together, and I work with them. We start to develop the story, that type of thing. Again, this is where the coach comes in. Okay, shiny object. Remember that your key personnel are that's your brilliance, okay? And we'll talk about whether they're an introvert or extroverts. I really don't care. I can coach them to become extemporaneous. We'll talk about that in a second. They're all soloists in their own right. They all know what they want to say. They all know their stuff, and you get. But what happens when your sopranos are too loud and you can't hear the altos and the basses is flat? And when you're pulling this choir together, you got to teach them to sing as a choir too. Okay. So as I'm working with the sectionals, and we usually have 3 sectional sessions with each one of the primary and alternates. Okay. At the same time, I'm beginning to tweak their story so that when they come together as a choir, as a full team. It's important later. I'll hit that point in a second. Okay. So 3 sessions, primaries and alternates, comfort with the topic. That's what I'm driving for with sectionals. Okay. Introvert or extrovert. I don't care. I don't care if you're introvert, extrovert. I think I said this before. The best speakers I know are introverts. They just know their topic. They're the expert. So that's where we got to get them to. Okay. There's 4 types of presentation styles. You guys just saw that I'm an impromptu speaker. That shiny object jumps up, that rabbit jumps up, I chase it. Okay. My problem is I lose track of time. Arlinda, don't laugh. Okay. Well, for my first time presenting here, I lost complete track of time and I kept going. All right. So impromptu, good, usually extroverts, usually know their topics, very comfortable with people. They do very, very well, but they have a tendency not to pay attention to time. I can work with an impromptu. I just got to time box them as much as possible. Manuscripts, they need to read it. Okay, it's got to be right in front of them. And they have a tendency to come across staccato. They don't have the energy that we're looking for. It's almost like I can't talk unless I read it type of a thing. So we tend to move away from that. Okay. Manuscript people, I get them comfortable with their script book. We haven't gotten to the script book yet. But then at the same time, I want to move them away from that. I want them to come across as where we're going through now is we go to the memorizers. Okay. Memorizers I can work with. They memorize everything they have to say. Sometimes I lose the energy. So what we do is we coach. I can work with memorizers. I have no problem with that. We coach them to get their cues off the slides. Okay. So they know exactly what they have to say. Then there's that one we're all driving for. That's extemporaneous. Now, extemporaneous can come across a lot like an impromptu speaker, but really what we're trying to get to is we're trying to get to the fact that you are the expert. Okay. And you'll see me say this all the time. You're the expert and I want you on my team. If I get the customer there in their mind, you got it. Okay. So those are some of the things that we're working on. We start to work on slide assignments and time tracking. This is the administrative part of coaching and script books. Okay. So we're going to talk about what they are. That was a check mark says we want to get this to extemporaneous. All right. So I don't know if I said this to you. I know I said this week. I told somebody this week, but we had a situation where they had 90 minutes. Okay. 90 minutes. And this is what the statement of objective said. We are not going to evaluate the slides. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Okay. It's going to be very interactive. And as long as the government tells you what the rules are going in, they say we're gonna have discussions throughout the presentation. All right. So this isn't indicative. Let's just say this is a 90-minute one. You see the 90 minutes. But what I did was I wanted to show the slides. This gives the coach creativity. So what I did was instead of I got to present 120 slides in 2 hours or 100 slides in 90 minutes. what this did for us is gave us the ability, and I love the fact that it was interactive, gave us ability to coach these folks to be able to know their topic so well and give them 4 and 5 minutes per slide. Okay. Another thing that was really interesting on this is that I had 2 folks who were they were strong introverts. Okay. They felt like they needed to have a script in front of them all the time. And what we did was we coached them to this point. The bid PM was incredible. He knew this customer well. He knew this team well. We were already in an interactive and questions could be asked at any time. So what I did for the bid PM, I told him, I said, sir, this is what I want you to do. You know what they have to say. You've got that. If they miss something, ask them the question. Okay. And this guy he was incredible. I'll say incredible 4 times. Okay. So Lisa, she missed something because Lisa, I remember that you were working for such and such company at this agency and you did this, this, and this. Can you tell us how that worked? Oh, yeah. And she jumped right in and started telling about it. Gave us a lot of creativity. And that, again, that's just one of the things that coaches can do. I always ask for, if you give me 90 minutes, if you give me 100 minutes, I want a tithe. I want a tenth of it. Okay. I want to have a little bit of a buffer in there. So in situations where if I got 90 minutes, give me a 10% tithe, I'm going to coach to 81 minutes. And that's how we're going to set it up. And then we haven't talked about the other rehearsals yet. We move into script rehearsals. We're really timing that kind of stuff. Okay. So I track every slide all the way down and we start to see our trends and where we need to make our fixes. Okay. So this is an example of a kind of a time tracking sheet, an assignment sheet. If you notice, we have section titles. Typically things are set up in sections. Section L, go back to section L. I'll tell you how to organize this. You're going to have someone who's going to be a lead for that section, slide number, slide title, who the presenter is. And one of the things I try to do, what's the total number of slides in their time box, okay? So they know what they're up against. Okay, one more thing I did coaching this one, making sure we got time. I had one where it was the bid PM had the center section, and she had the most time. And I think she was budgeted for 20 minutes, and she was now at 37 minutes, 38 minutes. Everybody kept looking at me, and I wasn't going to stop her, okay? And when we all got said and done, we kind of do an aftermath, kind of a post-game show. And she knew right away what she did. She went back to her scripts and she began to fix her scripts and she came all perfect. So that's what the value of this stuff is. So we kind of see where we're going. Script book. All right. Script book is something that we try to coach away from it. It's necessary up front. Okay. But what we're trying to do as we get into, we do a script rehearsals, they can use the script books as they're going through. We get into our full rehearsals. I want to take that crutch away. Okay. The real key to this, and we're doing these script books together. So align the time tracker to where the time tracker say, duh, it's slide by side, aligns with the slides, duh, it's slide by side. Every slide is represented, duh, because we have to time every slide. But watch this. The dialogue in the script area is created and maintained by the primary and alternate speaker. So the key is that both of them are working on that dialogue together. All right. So when if something happens and the primary can't be there and I put in an alternate, he already knows the information. Okay. So that's a character, that's the anatomy of the script book. And there's an example. Just notice the slides on the top. Who's my speaker? Who's my alternate speaker? How much time I've got for this slide? And I let them script it out. Okay. And then this is our outcome. This is our desired outcome. We got compliance. They're getting more comfortable with the slides. The message is consistent. I coached a team one time and they kept staying away from, everybody was an impromptu speaker. Let me just tell you that right away. Well, here's the problem. Every time they got to a slide, every session we had got to the slide, they were telling a different story. I'm saying, guys, there's no consistent in your messages, okay? You're telling me something different. Every time I've seen you present this slide, it was different. So we need to get it down so you have a consistent story. Managing the time box is beautiful. Speaker to speaker transition. This is so interesting. Remember to talk about engaging the mind, okay? How I transitioned to my next. I gave you a beautiful story about how was that boss. That was incredible. Okay, it was awesome. That was a good exchange. Okay, so what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out how are we going to do those exchanges so they're doing it the same way each time. Here's another thing you play with the mind. Remember, I want them to learn. It's that learning paradigm. All right. What if? Watch this. Jay talked about this 4 slides ago. Okay, I'm gonna expand that a little more. Okay, so what did you just do? He set the seeds or planted the seeds or gave you a baseline. You begin to build on top of it. They now remember both speakers. Or you say, I'm going to give you a baseline, and oh, by the way, Lisa is going to give you a little bit more detail on this. Okay, so those are the types of things that engaging the mind. Okay, speaker to speaker transition and bringing them in as a team. Developing the visual cues, that's important. As you're going down, when we talk about memorizers, they have their cues on what they see on their screen, and then proof points and takeaways that they get to refine those. Okay. Now we get into the teams. I'm working with a team now. Okay. One of the things we try to remember is during any kind of oral presentation, your program manager is alpha. Dead up. Program manager is alpha. Okay. Avoid burnout. I've tried to set up schedule of rehearsals. We know they're going to have 3 script rehearsals. They have the script books with them. Okay. They're going to have 3 practice question rehearsals. This is interesting. Remember, most of these have 90 minutes. Then you take a break, and then they come back and the government asks questions. How do you handle those questions? Okay. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. Well, we can talk about it now. So what I try to do is what we in our practice question practicing. What we try to do is we make sure that the program manager receives it. Okay. I did one where it was remote. We put everybody in around a conference room, and the program manager was sitting right in the middle. And she knew as it came through, Chip, can you speak to this? Or Chip would go, Glenda, I think that was her name. Glenda, is it okay if I answer this question? Absolutely. Okay. So even in how they handled the questions in Q&A, sent that cohesive message about the teams. Okay. Decoding and encoding nonverbal communications. Everybody talks about, I got to read body language. You got to read body language. Ever thought about that you can use body language as a weapon? Okay. Perfect example is when somebody's making a presentation, you're sitting there and you're agreeing with them. That sends a powerful message. And one of the things we want to do is we want to make sure that we are supporting the person who's speaking. Okay. So we teach those things, what to look for. Situational awareness. Now that's trying to decode body language. Okay. And then our situational awareness is a very simple formula: observe, interpret, anticipate, modify. Okay. So the idea is that as a teacher, I can sit there and pretty much figure out who's getting it, who's not getting it. How can I anticipate where their mind's at, modify my messaging a little bit so I can get them on board. Okay. So we try to teach that. Here's another one. If you're making a presentation, you're up there making a presentation. Okay. And if everybody's paying attention, the whole team is sitting there in a presentation, and 3 of your audience, the TED members, go down and start writing. Dead, I guarantee you a question's coming. So everybody needs to pay attention to that type of thing. So when you go back, when the government's putting their questions together, we're going to get a question on this, okay? Because their body language told us that was going to happen. Okay, make sense? All right, we'll move forward. Like I can see you guys. Sorry about that. If you were in a room, I could do this. All right. Then we move into the day of the presentation. Okay, day of the presentation. Look, it's just like we practiced. Okay, if you trust the process, it's just like we practiced. I did one large company, very large deal. And this person was incredible. I used to say, her name was Ray. I said, Ray, I don't have to say this, but man, that was good. She goes, I'm so nervous. She was an incredible speaker. And she was an introvert, but she was an incredible speaker, and she did very, very well. I kept telling her, just trust the process. When we get there, trust the process. The day of, it's going to be just like we practiced. We walked in day of. She turned and looked at me, because coaches are always there during the day of too. They don't stay in the room. We're not allowed. We have to leave. She said, Mike, she goes, you were absolutely right. I got up this morning and go, this is just like we practiced yesterday. Okay. Just like we practiced. Watch our time cues, breathe, relax, laugh, kid with each other, champion your part of the story. That my team trusts me to do my job. Okay. Go back to sports soccer. You're a goalie, your team trusts you to do your job. That's my job. I'm going to champion my part of the story. Okay. Remember, you are the expert. That's what we're trying to do. Support one another. Encode those body languages. Agree with each other. Go like this. You give them thumbs up. I had them high five one time coming off. I knew the audience. It went well. They would high five when they come off, or shake each other's hand, thank each other for being a champion your story. That kind of stuff just goes a long way. Be a cheerleader. Sorry, I put it down in there. Be a cheerleader. Clarifying questions. Remember this. Your program manager is always alpha. If you get the opportunity, huddle. If you have to huddle. You might have to ask the contracting officer in the room, is it okay if I caucus with my team? Okay. More than likely, they'll say yes. okay? And always have your best of breed. Whoever can give the best response, have them respond, okay? Your oral presentation, just like you practice, nothing new. And one thing I always do is I always come back and I say, okay, let's do a retrospective. What went well, okay? What do we need to improve on, okay? And what are our action items when we get said and done? And here's a slide of just basically the entire process pulled together. You have this, okay? And again, it's always important to do, in our books, we talk about continuous capture improvement. Well, continuous orals improvement. We'll make up another one here. You heard it here first. We're going to talk about continue orals improvement, COIS, okay? All right, so guys, it's that simple. It's that simple, okay? There's a lot in the coaching part. There's a lot that's going on behind the scenes, okay? But this is really the process. Trust the process. This is not plan, prepare, practice, and present. It's been around forever, okay? What we did, we just inserted in stuff that we needed to do. With that said, I think I have 15 minutes. I did it right this time. We can answer questions, and we'll go from there, okay? Biggest no-nos, okay. I've seen RFPs. Let me pull this over here. Sorry. All right, nobody laugh. Let me do this too. All right. I've seen RFPs that have said that the proposal will become part of the contract. Okay. RFPs where a proposal becomes part of the contract. They used to do this a lot. Okay. You'll notice too, especially on the statement of objectives, part of when you get a sue, a lot of times what ends up happening is you submit a PWS back to the government, okay? So the idea is that here's the PWS. Oh, by the way, here's how I'm going to solve the PWS. And oh, by the way, here is my my pricing, okay? And what they turn around is they submit back to you that PWS that you wrote, okay? So I have seen this before, okay? Matter of fact, I was just talking to somebody, my old brain. I'm going to say maybe 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, and we were talking about. Do you remember when we used to get our statement of work or our proposal sent back to us as this is what you're required to do? And I think it's actually a good thing. We do capture support, we do service delivery support, all that kind of stuff. One thing, and even your 1102s will tell you, read your contract. The contracting officers need to read the contract. What's responsible for what, who's responsible for what. And I think it's a good practice, by the way. I hope that answers your questions. What are your recommendations for adaptations of this process for an oral presentation that is virtual instead of in person? Okay, we're in the world of virtuals right now, okay? So we have to get creative because I want to still, for me, I want to come across that this is a team, all right, if that makes sense. Now, this summer I just did 2. Both of them got high confidence ratings, okay? So I did my job, okay? One was all virtual, okay? So I had different windows going on. And this was the one I told you the PM was incredible. He would ask questions so that everything got covered. The other one was, this is how we did it. This was a large business, okay? And they had a conference room. And what we did is we set the conference room up, okay, with the chairs and think of looking at the conference room sideways or looking at the conference table sideways. So I could get everybody up there. The chairs were in their place. And we actually practiced moving. So whoever's presenting was sitting in the middle, okay? And then when they got done, they would get up and they would change chairs or they would rotate in the order they had to make their presentation, okay? Very, very professional. And then when we broke and the client was putting their questions together, we pulled all the chairs together so they were almost in a huddle. And it really came off well. I mean, I would love to have had a studio to do that with, but we did it in the conference room. They had their monitors up. They could see the customer. And I won't tell you anything, but their script book was up, okay? They're able to walk through the script book, rolling through with one finger and changing. We have a remote that we give them, and they were flipping the slides with the remote. They were able to scroll through their script books. So, yes, I have yet to do a hybrid. I've taught in a hybrid environment, but I've yet to do a hybrid for orals. I hope that answers your question, okay? Tips for doing oral presentations via MS Teams. Pretty much the technologies are the same, okay? I'm not a Teams fan. But we've done presentations with teams. A lot of times with Zoom. I like Zoom. And we've done presentations with Google Meets. It's not Meets anymore, but Hangouts, I guess, is what it is. So we've done them with all of them. Tips for Microsoft Teams. I don't know okay, if you can write down what you feel like you're missing in Teams, maybe we can talk about a workaround. Okay. Teams lets you share, Teams lets you go whiteboard, Teams lets you pass things off back and forth. I don't know if I have a good answer for that. I do apologize. I would like to know what the limitation in Teams that you feel. Okay. How is this process modified for video? Oh, I just said that. Video orals. Process doesn't, okay, let me go back. Maybe I didn't answer your question. The process doesn't change. It's the same. Okay. It's delivery platform. What's going to change is getting creative. I'm going to say this. Okay. Remember when I talked about I wanted to help the speakers get all their information out so everything was taken care of. Okay. We were able to do that. The process was still the same, but we were able to do that because we got the PM. And the fact that it was interactive, it was already interactive. So I had the latitude to be able to do that. That's the coaching side. What am I allowed to do? All right. Some of you are going to laugh at me, but I'm going to tell you this. One of them, what we did, and there's an old structure. It's called chiasm. Look it up, Google it. I promise you, it's a real word. But the idea is you got a topic here, and you got it's wind up. It's the same topic here. Then there's B, B prime, C, C prime, and X. X is kind of where you want. That's the meat of it all. What we did was we organized it so the introduction and the person would wrap up what he did. We built up to the story where the PM got in there. Once the PM got in there, she carried the majority of the meat, and then we would begin to unravel it and pull it all back together. And then we opened up with the executive, and the executive actually had like 20 minutes, and he was able just to talk about your environment because he came out of their environment. Very, very powerful. It's called chiasm. And the idea is, again, it goes back to the mind. The mind drives down to what the topic is supposed to be, and then you can just kind of bring it back and remind them of what they heard. Tell them what you're going to do it, then tell them what you just did for them. It was kind of like that, if that makes sense. I hope that answered your question. One-on-one with inexperienced or weak presenter. Okay. All right. So if I have an inexperienced or weak presenter, typically what ends up happening is once they get comfortable, they might be a weak presenter, but they know their topic. And that's what I begin to focus on. Okay. I can have a, absolute genius engineer. Okay. And he's just not really good at presenting. But what you find is that when they become comfortable in the fact that they're the expert, they start to come across as the expert. People understand when you're nervous, and I try to get this in people's mind. It's okay if you're nervous. Okay, it's okay if I get nervous, and I'm so used to this. Okay, but there's times I get a little knot in my stomach, and am I going to say this the right way? And did I say it the right way? So what we do is we work through. By the time we get done with the scripting, they're pretty comfortable with what they're going to do. I can't coach out nerves, but I can coach in expertise. I don't know if that made sense. And I think for the most part, people understand nerves. I hope that answered your question. And it would be, typically it's one-on-one, and that typically happens in the sectionals when we're working with the sectionals, okay? Because sectionals, they're presenting to me. And I would say, maybe if you try to say it this way, if they're good about keeping the script book out, they'll write down, they'll make a change to the script book. And I'll say, well, maybe you might want to say this. Oh, by the way, did you remember so-and-so said this? Tie those two thoughts together, and they'll write it down. So it's just a matter of working with them one-on-one. That was a good question, by the way. Okay. Sorry. Is there an approximate time frame, days, weeks, that one could plan for adequate cover the 4 Ps you mentioned leading up to oral's presentation? Okay. That is actually an excellent question. Typically, the coaching process takes around 60 hours. Okay. And I can actually break it down. It's about 60 hours. All right. What I want to do is I want to avoid burnout, and I got to be creative in how I'm going to avoid burnout. So what I'll do is there was an old thing, 2 times a day. And I kept thinking 2 times a day is hard. You know, if I make you run through it in the morning and make you run through it again in the afternoon, I'm going to burn you out. So what I would do is I'll run a full rehearsal, a script rehearsal, and then I'll do a practice question rehearsal. Break it up a little bit to ease the mind. But think about around 60 hours. It's kind of the ballpark. I did one in 56 hours. This next one that I'm about to do, I think is set up for 60 hours. So it depends on getting all the sectionals in, getting rehearsals in, breaking the rehearsals up. And that way I avoid burnout. Okay. Plus, these folks got full-time jobs too. Got to take that stuff into consideration. So I gave you consumption time, but I didn't quite lay out how many weeks it's going to take. I guess that's going to depend on their work schedules and that type of thing. When we get closer to, by the time I'm doing a full rehearsal and a dress rehearsal, then talk about the dress rehearsal. Let me talk about that real quick. And I think we're running out. I got 5 more minutes. Dress rehearsal is a true dress rehearsal. Okay. They come in dressed up. Right. I have people that they have, some of their bosses end up showing up for a dress rehearsal. Okay. And they're all sitting out there. So there's my audience. There's my new tab. Okay. Everything's new. Everything's fresh. They don't know what's coming because I usually play the government. Government's got a question. And then I would give them the question and they come back. Now these folks have got their questions. They've got their questions prepared. Dress rehearsals are cool. Okay. For the most part, dress rehearsals go very, very well. All right. And you think it's a surprise because you're changing it up on. What I try to do, I did one where dress rehearsal is going to start at 11 o'clock, 11 a.m. I want everybody there for your dress rehearsal. Executives are going to be there, all that kind of stuff. So they're sitting outside and it's a glass wall so they can see us. And we're sitting in there and I sit back and we sit and talk and I make them wait till 11:15. Okay. I purposely tried to drive their nerves up a little bit. They came in out of the park. They did an excellent job. So we try to work with that. Okay. Okay. I don't know. Oh, maybe I do. Let me scroll down. Sorry. What's the appropriate way to address a question you don't know how to answer? I mean, that's a great question. Okay. If you remember the slide I brought up and I said, for the PM, if you don't know how to answer the question, okay, first of all, I won't cuss. What's the word I'm looking for? Don't give out baloney. Okay, they're going to read that right away. Okay. So what we do is if they'll let you caucus, okay, what you do is a PM should ask a contracting officer, whoever's leading it, say, can I caucus with my team? Can I huddle with my team? Whatever phrase you want to use. More than likely, they're going to say yes. Get together, put your minds together. Remember, Q&A is an extra time there. You're not going to run out of time. It's government's time to ask questions. Typically, what you're going to do is you're going to get you're going to have not that much. They want to get out of there. So that didn't sound right. They've been there so long. They're going to ask their questions, get the clarifications, and get going. So you're going to have a little bit of time. Cuddle. Oh my gosh! It just made some of you laugh. Huddle. Caucus. That's where I got the cuddle from. So caucus with your team. Sit down and really prep the best of breed. So if it's a technical, let's say it's a technical deal, and there's a middleware guy, and there's a database guy there, and then you have an OS guy sitting there, and then you have an upstack application development guy there. If it's about the database guys answer the question. If it's about middleware answers the question. If it's, oh, by the way, this is a database thing, but we can do this quicker in the middleware, so we're taking that query and making it shorter, blah, blah, blah. The idea is let them figure out that question and let the best person answer that question. Make sense? I hope that makes sense. I think that's all the questions. Arlinda, do you want to come back on? And we're at 1:59. I get a star. I got us done.
Yes, you do. You definitely get a star. You know, I have to tell you, I was prepared that we might actually go over a little bit because on your previous modus operandi, but fantastic job. I learned a lot. I hope everybody on the call learned a lot. And thank you so much for being here today. I thought stellar presentation.